The cowboy knelt in the dust, staring at his daughter's pale face, her chest still, her lips blue from the desert night. He thought she was gone, until an Apache woman appeared, her voice calm but urgent. "Your daughter is still breathing." In that instant, hope clashed with fear, and he knew he had seconds to act. But why would a stranger, one from a people he was taught to mistrust, save the child he loved most? The morning sun rose hard over the plains, burning away the chill of night and painting the land in shades of fire and gold. Samuel Reeves had not slept. He sat on his knees beside his daughter, Emma, the little girl lying motionless on a blanket spread across the dirt. Her breaths had grown faint through the night, until, at dawn, they seemed to vanish altogether. He pressed a hand to her chest, desperate, waiting for the rise that would not come. His heart thudded in his ears, louder than the silence around them. She was only 7, too young to fade like this, too young to be swallowed by the same land he had crossed to protect her. The horse grazed nearby, restless, ears flicking at every whisper of wind. Samuel's throat burned as he whispered, "Come back to me, Em, please." A shadow fell across them. He looked up sharply, hand reaching instinctively for the revolver at his belt. Standing a few paces away was a woman, Apache, tall, her dark braids loose over her shoulders. Her dress was worn, her skin marked by sun and years of hardship. But her eyes were sharp, steady, unshaken by the sight of the cowboy clutching his daughter in the dust. Her voice broke the silence, calm but firm. "Your daughter is still breathing." Samuel's heart lurched. He glanced down again, his hand trembling as he pressed harder against Emma's chest. And there, faint, so faint he might have missed it, came the shallow flutter of a breath, a whisper of life, fragile as a thread. He looked back at the woman, torn between hope and suspicion. "What do you know of her?" The woman stepped closer, crouching by the girl's side. Her movements were careful, deliberate. She pressed 2 fingers lightly at Emma's throat, closing her eyes as if listening beyond the silence. "She is between worlds," the woman murmured. "Not gone." "Not yet. But if you wait, she will be." Samuel's grip on his revolver loosened, his chest tightening with both relief and fear. He had heard stories of Apache healers, of medicine and rites the white townsfolk called superstition, but here, in the empty desert, faced with his daughter's fading life, those stories were no longer whispers to mock. They were his only chance. He swallowed hard, his voice raw. "Then tell me what to do." The woman met his gaze, unblinking. "You must trust me." And in that moment, Samuel realized trust might be the only thing standing between his daughter and the grave. Samuel's hand hovered near his revolver, torn between instinct and desperation. The Apache woman's calm unsettled him. She wasn't pleading, she wasn't bargaining. She simply looked at him as if the choice had already been made, as if his daughter's life balanced not on medicine or prayer, but on trust. Emma's lips parted with another shallow gasp. Barely there. Samuel's breath hitched. He had no time. With a curse under his breath, he pulled his hand from the revolver and gestured stiffly, "Do it. Whatever it is you can do, do it now." The woman nodded once, without triumph, without smugness. She moved closer, kneeling in the dust beside Emma. From a leather pouch at her side, she drew a bundle wrapped in cloth. She opened it carefully, revealing dried herbs, strips of bark, and a small stone bowl. Samuel watched, uneasy. His mind screamed against it. This wasn't medicine, not the kind he knew. But when she crushed the herbs and mixed them with water from his canteen, her hands worked with steady precision, like a doctor dressing a wound. She dipped her fingers into the mixture, brushing it gently across Emma's lips and chest. Then she pressed her palms lightly over the child's ribs, whispering in her own tongue. The words were low, rhythmic, like the beat of a drum. Samuel swallowed hard. His throat burned with questions, with doubt. He shifted closer, his voice sharp. "What are you saying?" The woman didn't stop. "Words older than this land. Not spells. Not tricks. They call her spirit back to the body. She must want to return." Samuel's heart clenched. He looked at Emma, her small frame rising faintly now, each breath just a little stronger. He wanted to believe it was the herbs, the air, anything but words he didn't understand. But belief didn't matter. She was breathing. Minutes stretched like hours. The woman wiped Emma's brow with a strip of cloth, then leaned back, her eyes fixed on the child. Samuel leaned forward, desperate. "Is she—" "Alive," the woman said simply, "but weak. She needs fire, warmth, rest. And you must not move her until her spirit is steady again." Relief crashed over him, so fierce it nearly broke him. He pressed a hand over his face, forcing back the tears burning his eyes. "Thank God." The woman's gaze flicked to him, unreadable. "Thank the breath still inside her. It is not yours to command nor mine, only hers." Samuel bristled at the correction, but bit down his anger. He had no right to argue, not when his daughter was still drawing air. He busied himself with kindling, striking flint until a small fire crackled near Emma's blanket. The flames licked the chill from the air, painting Emma's face in warm light. She stirred faintly, a small sound escaping her lips. Samuel almost collapsed with relief. He glanced at the woman, his gratitude caught behind his teeth. Instead, what came out was guarded, suspicious. "Why help us? You don't even know us." The woman looked into the fire, her expression unreadable. "Because a child should not pay for the sins of men." Her words cut deep. Samuel stiffened, unsure if she meant him or the world at large. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She looked at him then, her eyes dark and steady. "Tayanita." "Tayanita," he repeated, the name strange on his tongue. He extended a hand, awkward. "Samuel Reeves." She didn't take it. Instead, she turned back to Emma, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Keep her near the fire. The cold of night will come again soon." Samuel's hand dropped. He stared at the flames, frustration and gratitude wrestling inside him. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of fire and Emma's soft breaths. Finally, Samuel spoke, his voice low. "You said she's between worlds. You've seen this before." Tayanita's gaze didn't waver from the child. "I have seen many carried to the edge. Some return, some do not. The body fights, but the spirit chooses." Samuel swallowed, his throat dry. "And if her spirit doesn't choose—" Tayanita's voice was quiet, firm. "Then you must let her go." The words hit like a hammer. Samuel shook his head violently. "No, I won't. She's all I have." Tayanita looked at him then, truly looked, as though weighing the weight of his soul. "Then you will fight beside her. But understand, love cannot drag her back if she does not wish to stay." Samuel opened his mouth to argue, but Emma stirred again, her fingers twitching against the blanket. Both of them leaned in, watching as her eyes fluttered, half opening, then closing again. A fragile sign, but a sign nonetheless. Hope flared, hot and dangerous in Samuel's chest. He looked at Tayanita, his voice almost breaking. "She's coming back. I can feel it." Tayanita nodded once, her face calm, though Samuel thought he saw the faintest flicker of relief in her eyes. For the first time since dawn, Samuel let himself breathe, but deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Emma was alive, but weak, fragile, a candle in the wind. And Carver's men weren't the only predators roaming these plains. The fire crackled louder, sparks drifting into the dark. Samuel stared into the flames, jaw tight. He had trusted an Apache woman once, and his daughter lived because of it. But trust was dangerous, and tomorrow, when the sun rose again, he knew the land would test them both. And from the way Tayanita sat, still and watchful, Samuel realized she knew it too. The fire burned low, its glow painting the hollow in shifting shades of amber. Samuel sat hunched, rifle across his knees, his eyes flicking between his sleeping daughter and the Apache woman who had appeared like a shadow from the desert. He owed her more than words could say, yet unease coiled in his chest like a snake. Tayanita's movements were deliberate, each gesture careful as she added a sprig of dried sage to the fire. Smoke curled upward, sharp and pungent. Samuel wrinkled his nose. "What's that for?" Her gaze never left the flames. "The smoke carries sickness away. Your daughter's breath must not be smothered by what clings to her." Samuel exhaled hard, shaking his head. "Smoke and whispers won't heal her. She needs rest, food, maybe a doctor from Silver Rock." Tyanita looked at him then, her eyes calm but sharp. "If you move her before she is strong, she will die on the trail. No doctor will bring her back." The certainty in her voice chilled him. Samuel looked at Emma, her chest rising faintly, her face pale in the firelight. He rubbed a hand across his beard, torn between every instinct screaming to get her to town and the knowledge that, so far, Tyanita's hands had done what his could not. He muttered, "Why should I trust you?" Tyanita's expression didn't change. "You already have, when you let me touch her, when you let me speak over her." Samuel's jaw tightened. That was desperation. "Desperation ain't trust." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Desperation is the doorway to truth. When all else fails, you see what remains." The words settled heavy, though he didn't want to admit their weight. He busied himself with the fire, feeding it a few more sticks, anything to avoid her eyes. The horse stamped suddenly, ears pricked. Samuel was on his feet in an instant, rifle raised, scanning the dark beyond the circle of light. The plain stretched endless, but the silence had shifted, too still, too watchful. Tyanita rose slowly, moving to the edge of the firelight. She crouched low, pressing her hand against the earth. After a moment, she whispered, "Hoofbeats. Many." Samuel's gut twisted. He strained his ears, and then he heard it too, the faint rhythm of riders, distant but drawing nearer. He cursed under his breath, heart pounding. Carver. It had to be. Word spread fast in these lands, and Samuel's ranch had already burned days ago. If Carver knew Samuel was still breathing, and that he carried a child. Samuel turned sharply to Tyanita. "We move, now." She shook her head. "If you move her, she dies." The words cut like a knife. Samuel's grip on the rifle tightened. "If we stay, they kill us all." For the first time, something flickered in Tyanita's eyes. Hesitation, the faintest crack in her calm. She looked at Emma, then back at Samuel. "We cannot outrun them with her in this state, but we can hide." "Hide?" Samuel's voice was harsh. "From Carver's men. You think brush and stone will keep them from sniffing us out?" Tyanita stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "I know these lands better than they ever will. There are caves in the ridge, narrow and dark. No horse can enter, only men on foot. If we reach them before the riders close, we live." Samuel's breath caught. It was madness, but better madness than suicide. He glanced at his daughter, still breathing faintly beneath the blanket. He couldn't carry her far, but he couldn't leave her either. He met Tyanita's gaze, his voice rough, then lead the way. She nodded once, already gathering her pouch and herbs. Samuel lifted Emma gently into his arms, her body light as air, her warmth frighteningly faint. He wrapped her in the blanket, pressing his cheek against her hair. "Stay with me, little one," he whispered. They doused the fire quickly, plunging the hollow into darkness. The stars blazed sharp overhead as they moved, Samuel carrying Emma, Tyanita leading with steps swift and certain. The horse followed, reins loose, hooves muffled on the sand. The hoofbeats behind them grew clearer, the ground trembling under the weight of pursuit. Samuel's breath came ragged, his muscles burning with the effort of carrying Emma. Still he pushed on, every step driven by the faint rise and fall of her chest against his own. Tyanita guided them to a ridge where the land split jagged, stone teeth rising against the sky. She slipped into a narrow cut between the rocks, motioning Samuel to follow. The passage was barely wide enough for his shoulders, the stones scraping his coat as he squeezed through. Inside, the air was cooler, damp, smelling of earth and old silence. The passage widened just enough for Samuel to set Emma down gently against the wall. He crouched beside her, his rifle still in hand, listening. The hoofbeats thundered closer, then slowed. Voices carried faint on the wind, men shouting, laughing, certain of their prey. Tyanita crouched near the entrance, eyes sharp, her hand pressed to the stone as if it could tell her secrets. She whispered, "They will pass, if you keep still." Samuel's finger rested on the trigger, sweat dripping down his temple. The sound of boots on stone came closer, too close. Shadows flickered across the narrow opening, torchlight spilling faintly inside. One rider dismounted, his spurs clinking as he approached the rocks. Samuel's chest tightened, his thumb brushing the rifle's hammer. The rider's voice came low, cruel. "I know you're here, Hart. Carver wants the girl. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Emma stirred weakly, a faint sound escaping her lips. Samuel froze, terror choking him. The rider paused. The torchlight wavered closer. Tyanita's eyes met Samuel's, fierce and certain. Her hand tightened on the knife at her belt, and in that breathless silence, Samuel knew. The choice between trust and death was about to come again. The scrape of boots on stone echoed louder in the narrow passage. The rider's torchlight flared against the canyon wall, spilling jagged shadows into the cave. Samuel held his breath, pressing Emma close, his finger tight against the rifle's trigger. The man stepped closer, spurs clinking. His silhouette filled the entrance and broad-shouldered, hat low. He raised the torch higher, leaning into the narrow cut. The flames licked the dark, creeping dangerously close to where they crouched. "Come on out, Hart," he drawled, voice smooth, almost amused. "Carver says he'll take the girl easy, but if you make him work, well, we both know he don't mind a little blood." Samuel's chest burned with fury, but he stayed silent. The man sniffed, grinning in the firelight. "Thought I heard something. A little voice. Weak, like she's calling for her daddy." Emma whimpered faintly against Samuel's chest. His heart stopped. The rider's head snapped toward the sound, grin widening. "There you are." Before he could step in, Tyanita moved. She shot forward from the shadows, knife flashing in her hand. With a sharp cry, she drove the blade upward, striking the man's arm. The torch clattered to the ground, sputtering in the dirt. He roared, staggering back, pistol yanked from his belt. Samuel fired without thinking, the shot deafening in the tight space. The man collapsed, blood soaking his coat, his pistol dropping beside him. His body blocked the entrance, half in shadow, half in the pale torchlight. For a heartbeat, silence. Then shouts erupted outside. "They're in the rocks!" one voice barked. "Hart's holed up in there!" Boots thundered, spurs clinking against stone. More men dismounted, their voices carrying sharp with excitement. Samuel's stomach twisted. They had minutes, maybe less, before the others forced their way in. Tyanita yanked her knife free, her breath sharp but steady. She crouched beside Samuel, her eyes fierce. "We cannot stay. They will smoke us out, or bury us alive." Samuel nodded grimly, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. He glanced at Emma, still unconscious, her small frame trembling with every faint breath. "She can't run. Not like this." Tyanita's voice was hard, unwavering. "Then you must carry her. I will lead." The sounds outside grew louder, men dragging brush, snapping branches. Samuel's gut clenched. They meant to set fire at the mouth of the cave, smoke them out like animals. He lifted Emma again, cradling her against his chest. His muscles burned, but he didn't falter. "Where?" Tyanita motioned deeper into the passage. "There is another way. A cut through the ridge. Narrow, but it opens on the far side." Samuel followed her without hesitation, his boots crunching over stone. The cave tightened, the ceiling pressing low. Behind them, smoke began to seep in, acrid and stifling. Emma coughed weakly, the sound like a knife twisting in Samuel's chest. "Faster," he urged, though every step threatened to stumble in the dark. Tyanita moved with the surety of someone born to these lands. She touched the walls as she walked, fingers gliding over stone, finding paths invisible to Samuel's eyes. This way. The tunnel twisted sharply, the walls slick with damp. Samuel's shoulder scraped raw against rock as he squeezed through, Emma limp in his arms. Behind them, the roar of fire grew louder, smoke billowing, voices shouting curses into the night. At last, a sliver of moonlight appeared ahead, faint but real. Tyanita pointed. "There." Samuel pushed forward, emerging into the open air. The night hit him like a wave, cool, sharp, filled with stars. He stumbled out onto a narrow ledge high above the desert floor. The land stretched wide, torchlight flickering on the other side of the ridge where Carver's men swarmed. "We're trapped," Samuel muttered, his chest heaving. The drop below was sheer, 20 feet at least, jagged rocks waiting at the bottom. Tyanita crouched, scanning the ledge. Her eyes narrowed, sharp as a hawk's. "Not trapped. There." She pointed to a narrow trail winding down the side of the ridge, barely visible in the moonlight. "It is dangerous, but it is the only way." Samuel stared at the path, steep, crumbling, treacherous. Carrying Emma down it could mean death, but staying meant certain capture. Boots clattered inside the cave behind them. Torches flared in the tunnel. Samuel met Tyanita's eyes, his voice low but fierce. "You go first. Clear the way." She nodded, her face calm, though her hand tightened briefly on his arm. Then she turned, moving swiftly but carefully down the trail. Her balance was sure, her steps light. Samuel followed. Emma clutched tight, his heart hammering with every slip of gravel beneath his boots. Eli would have cursed the madness of it, but Eli wasn't here. It was only him, his daughter, and the woman who had dragged them this far from death. Above, shouts rang out. "They're on the ridge!" Gunfire sparked, bullets striking stone, chips flying. Samuel ducked low, shielding Emma with his body as he scrambled after Tyanita. The trail twisted, dropping steep into shadow. Tyanita looked back, her voice sharp but steady. "Do not stop, do not look down." Samuel gritted his teeth, forcing his body forward, one step, then another. The world shrank to the feel of stone beneath his boots, the warmth of Emma against his chest, and the unyielding certainty that if he faltered now, all of them would be lost. The gunfire grew louder, closer. A bullet struck the rock beside his head, spraying shards across his face, and then, suddenly, the ledge beneath his foot crumbled. His body lurched sideways, weight dragging him toward the edge. Emma slipped in his arms. Samuel shouted, clutching her tight, boots scrabbling for purchase. His free hand clawed at the rock, fingers tearing skin. He felt the void yawning below, the rush of air, the certainty of the fall, and in that instant, Tyanita's hand shot out, gripping his arm with strength he didn't expect. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on." Samuel clung to both her hand and his daughter, every muscle burning, the edge crumbling beneath him. Above, Carver's men shouted triumphantly, certain he would fall. But Samuel wasn't ready to let go, not of his daughter, not of this fight. Samuel's boots scraped on loose stone, his grip slipping as the ledge crumbled under him. For a breathless instant, he felt the void open beneath his body, Emma's fragile weight pulling him downward. His heart lurched in his chest. Then Tyanita's hand locked around his arm, her fingers digging deep into his skin. "Pull!" she shouted, her voice steady, fierce against the roar of panic in his head. With a guttural growl, Samuel hauled upward, muscles screaming. Stone broke away beneath his boots, cascading down into the darkness, but he refused to let go. Inch by inch, with Tyanita bracing her body against the wall, he dragged himself and Emma back onto the trail. They collapsed together against the rock, Emma limp but safe in his arms. Samuel's chest heaved, sweat stinging his eyes. He looked at Tyanita, her face tight with strain but unshaken. For a moment, words failed him. Then he muttered hoarsely, "You saved us." Her gaze didn't soften. "She is not meant for the ground yet. Keep moving." Gunfire cracked above, bullets sparking off stone. Samuel flinched, shielding Emma with his body. Tyanita surged forward, motioning urgently, "Down, now!" Before they blocked the trail, they pressed on, feet slipping on the treacherous path. Samuel's arms burned from carrying his daughter, but he gritted his teeth, each step driven by the faint rise and fall of her chest. Tyanita moved with the sure-footed grace of someone born to the cliffs, her knife still in hand, her eyes scanning every shadow. At last, the trail leveled into a narrow gorge where the walls rose high, muffling the shouts from above. The air was cooler here, damp with the smell of sage and dust. Samuel lowered Emma onto a flat stone, wiping sweat from his brow. His hands trembled from the effort of holding her, But relief tempered the pain. Tianita crouched beside Emma, checking her pulse with practiced calm. "She is still with us, but she grows weaker. We must find water, and soon." Samuel nodded, though his mind was still reeling. He looked at Tianita, his voice rough. "Why risk yourself for us? You could have let me fall." Her eyes flicked to him, dark and steady. "Because the child's breath carries more than your bloodline. Her life matters beyond you." The words unsettled him. He wanted to press, to demand what she meant. But exhaustion and fear tangled his thoughts. He only managed a bitter laugh. "Strange thing. Trust in a stranger with more than my own kin." Tianita's tone was sharp, unyielding. "It is not trust that kept you alive tonight. It was choice. You chose to hold on." Before Samuel could answer, the horse stamped nervously nearby, ears flicking toward the gorge entrance. Voices carried faint, distorted by the stone. The riders had circled, their torches glowing faintly in the distance. Samuel cursed under his breath, grabbing his rifle. "They're not giving up." Tianita straightened, her jaw set. "Then neither do we." She led them deeper into the gorge, where the stone walls narrowed again, forcing them single file. Samuel carried Emma, his rifle slung over his shoulder, while Tianita scouted ahead. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, echoing through the rock. At one bend, Tianita raised her hand, signaling him to stop. She crouched, pressing her palm to the ground. After a moment, she whispered, "They split. Some follow above the ridge. Some move into the gorge." Samuel's grip on his rifle tightened. "They'll trap us." Tianita's eyes flickered with resolve. "Not if we move first." She guided them to a small hollow beneath a jutting ledge, hidden by brush. Samuel laid Emma down gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. His chest ached with both relief and fear. Tianita crouched beside him, her voice low. "You love her fiercely." "That will give her strength." Samuel looked at her, anger and gratitude colliding inside him. "Love don't stop bullets." Her gaze didn't waver. "But it keeps you from letting go. That is stronger than you think." He stared at her, the firelight of her words unsettling him more than any gunman. Before he could respond, a shout rang out from the gorge. "They're here!" Torches flared, shadows leaping across the stone. Samuel grabbed his rifle, rising to his feet. Tianita stood beside him, knife glinting in her hand. The riders advanced, their laughter cruel, certain of victory. Samuel's breath came hard, his jaw tight. He glanced at Emma, then at Tianita. "If they get past us—" "They won't," Tianita cut in, her tone sharp as a blade. The first rider appeared, torch in one hand, revolver in the other. Samuel fired, the shot echoing through the gorge. The man fell, torch tumbling into the dirt. Another advanced, shouting curses. Tianita darted forward, her knife flashing, striking true before the man could raise his weapon. The gorge erupted in chaos, gunfire, shouting, the clash of steel and stone. Samuel fought with the desperation of a father, every bullet fired for the fragile breaths of his daughter behind him. Tianita moved like a shadow, swift and merciless, each strike precise. For the first time, Samuel realized she wasn't just a healer. She was a fighter, forged by loss, hardened by survival. But the riders kept coming, their torches filling the gorge with fire. Samuel's rifle clicked empty, his chest burned. Tianita's knife dripped red, her breath ragged. And still the shouts grew louder. More men poured in, their shadows stretching long. Samuel glanced at Emma, pale against the stone, her tiny chest rising faintly. He knew he couldn't let this gorge become her grave. He turned to Tianita, his voice raw. "We can't hold, not like this." Her eyes burned in the firelight. "Then we don't hold. We strike where they do not see." Before Samuel could ask, she pointed toward a crack in the gorge wall, a narrow fissure hidden in shadow. "Our way out," she said. The riders surged forward, guns raised, torches high, and Samuel knew they had only moments to choose between fight and escape. The crack in the gorge wall looked too narrow to carry hope. Samuel stared at it, Emma limp in his arms, the glow of torches closing in behind them. His pulse hammered. We'll never fit. Tyanita crouched by the fissure, running her hand along the stone. It widens inside, just enough. Follow me. Gunfire cracked, a bullet sparking against the wall inches from Samuel's head. He ducked, clutching Emma tighter. There was no time to doubt. With a growl, he forced himself forward, pressing sideways through the narrow slit of rock. His shoulders scraped raw, the stone biting into his coat. He shoved harder, gritting his teeth as the passage yawned into a narrow tunnel. Behind him, Tyanita slipped through effortlessly, her knife still in hand. She motioned for silence, her breath steady despite the chaos outside. The tunnel stretched black ahead, damp with the smell of earth and cold stone. Samuel moved quickly but carefully, cradling Emma against his chest. Every scrape of his boots echoed like a drum. Behind them, the shouts grew louder. "They went in the rocks! Light it up!" The glow of torches spilled into the fissure, flames licking the walls. Samuel's gut clenched. They were seconds away from being trapped. "Faster!" Tyanita urged, her voice low but sharp. They pressed deeper into the tunnel. Gate twisted sharply, narrowing again, forcing Samuel to crouch low as he carried Emma. The air grew colder, damp seeping through his shirt. He stumbled once, catching himself against the wall, his breath ragged. Tyanita's hand steadied him, her eyes flashing in the dark. "Do not stop, she needs you strong." Her words lit a fire in him. Samuel pushed on step by step until the tunnel began to slope downward. Faint air stirred against his face, a draft and carrying the scent of open desert. Relief surged. "We're close." Behind them, voices roared. "Smoke 'em out! Burn it all!" The smell of smoke drifted down the tunnel, acrid, suffocating. Samuel's throat tightened. He adjusted Emma in his arms, her small body trembling faintly against him. He whispered, "Hold on, little one. Just a little longer." At last, the tunnel spat them into the open. They stumbled onto a rocky slope overlooking a wide stretch of desert. The moon hung high, silver light bathing the land. Samuel gulped the fresh air, though smoke still clung to his lungs. Tyanita scanned the horizon quickly. "We cannot stay exposed. They will see us if we move too soon." Samuel crouched behind a boulder, laying Emma down gently on a blanket. Her chest still rose and fell, fragile but steady. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his heart twisting. "She's hanging on." Tyanita knelt beside the girl, sprinkling a few drops of water across her lips. "Her spirit fights, but she is weak. If we do not reach water by tomorrow, her breath will fade again." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Then we find it, whatever it takes." The horse shifted nervously, ears flicking toward the ridge. Shouts echoed faint, carried by the wind. The men were circling, searching for the other exit. Samuel gripped his rifle. "They'll find the trail soon." Tyanita's eyes burned in the moonlight. "Then we leave no trail." They gathered quickly, Samuel carrying Emma once more, while Tyanita led, her steps weaving across stone to hide their passage. The desert stretched endless, shadows long beneath the moon. Samuel's legs ached, but he pushed on, driven by the faint warmth of his daughter's breath. After what felt like hours, they reached a dry riverbed, its sand cool beneath their boots. Tyanita stopped, crouching low. She pressed her palm to the earth, her head tilted as if listening. Finally, she whispered, "They are close. Too close." Samuel scanned the darkness, rifle raised. He saw nothing, but his gut twisted. He trusted her senses now more than his own. "What do we do?" Her gaze flicked to Emma. "We split. I lead them away. You take her east. The water there will save her." Samuel froze, fury rising. "No. You leave. They'll kill you." Tyanita's eyes didn't waver. "Better they kill me than her. The pouch she carries in her breath is worth more than my life." Samuel stepped closer, his voice a growl. "She's my daughter. Don't you dare decide who's worth more." For the first time, something flickered in Tyanita's eyes, pain, sharp and unhidden. "Then decide now. Because if we stay, none of us live." The choice hung heavy between them. Samuel's heart pounded, his mind racing. He looked at Emma, pale but alive, and then at the woman who had saved her again and again. The sound of hooves broke the silence. Torches flickered on the ridge, moving fast. Samuel cursed under his breath, jaw tight. No splitting. We move together. If we die fighting. Tyanita stared at him, then nodded once, sharp and firm. Then we fight as one. She turned, leading them quickly into the shadows of the riverbed. Samuel followed, Emma in his arms, rifle slung across his back. The night closed around them, every sound sharp, every breath a battle. Behind them, the torches spread like wildfire across the ridge. Carver's men were hunting, closer than ever, and Samuel knew the desert would not let them run much longer. The final stand was drawing near. The riverbed stretched like a scar through the desert, pale sand glimmering under the moonlight. Samuel carried Emma close, her head resting weakly against his chest, each breath so faint it nearly disappeared against the night air. Tyanita moved ahead, knife in hand, her shadow long and sharp. Every few steps she paused, listening, not with ears alone, but with her whole body. "They are here," she whispered suddenly, freezing. Samuel halted, heart pounding. He strained to hear, and then he caught it. The faint clatter of hooves, the low murmur of men's voices carried on the wind. The sound wasn't behind them anymore. It was ahead. "They've split," Samuel muttered grimly. "They're boxing us in." Tyanita crouched, scanning the terrain. The riverbed narrowed ahead, walls of rock closing in like jaws. "If we stay here, they trap us. If we climb, they see us." Samuel adjusted Emma's weight in his arms, his muscles aching. "Then what?" Her gaze swept the sand, and for the first time, a flicker of hesitation touched her face. "We make them come to us." Before Samuel could reply, torchlight flared ahead. 3 riders emerged at the far bend, their flames painting the stone walls in fiery streaks. Behind them, more voices echoed, the rest of Carver's men, closing from the rear. Samuel's stomach dropped. They were surrounded. He set Emma gently against the rock wall, tucking the blanket around her. He brushed her hair back, whispering, "Stay with me, Em, just stay." Then he rose, rifle in hand, jaw set. Tyanita stood beside him, her knife gleaming in the firelight. Her voice was calm, steady. "We fight here." The first rider spurred forward, revolver raised. Samuel fired, the crack of his rifle splitting the night. The man toppled from the saddle, torch tumbling into the sand. Chaos erupted, shouts, gunfire, horses screaming. More men charged from behind, torches high. Samuel spun, firing again, the recoil jarring his shoulder. A bullet ripped past his coat, searing his arm, but he held his ground. Tyanita moved like a shadow, darting between the rocks. Her knife flashed once, twice. 2 riders fell before they even raised their guns. She seized a torch from the sand and hurled it into the brush, flames erupting in a sudden blaze. The fire roared, cutting off part of the advance, forcing the riders to veer. Samuel reloaded fast, sweat stinging his eyes. He fired at another rider, the man's scream echoing as he tumbled from his horse. But the numbers kept pressing, their torches circling like wolves. One man dismounted, charging straight at the blankets where Emma lay. Samuel's blood turned to ice. "No!" He sprinted forward, ramming the rifle butt into the man's face. The crunch of bone split the air as the rider collapsed. Samuel kicked his gun away, chest heaving, eyes darting back to his daughter. She still breathed. Tyanita's voice rang out over the din. "More are coming!" Samuel turned. At the far end of the riverbed, a figure appeared on horseback, broad-shouldered, coat black as night. Carver, his grin gleamed in the firelight, cruel and certain. He dismounted slowly, every step deliberate, revolver gleaming in his hand. "Hot!" he shouted, his voice booming across the gorge. "You've run long enough. Time to give me the girl." Samuel leveled his rifle, fury burning through his veins. "Over my dead body," Carver laughed low, shaking his head. "That's the idea." Gunfire thundered again as his men surged forward. Samuel and Tyanita fought back to back now, every strike, every shot born of desperation. Samuel dropped another man, his rifle smoking hot. Tyanita slashed one across the throat, spun, and drove her blade into another's side. But they were too many. For every rider that fell, another pressed closer, torches hemming them in, smoke stinging their eyes. Carver strode closer, his revolver steady, his grin unbroken. "You think you can beat me, Hart? You think one Apache woman and a dying child can stand against the world I own?" Samuel's chest heaved, rage and exhaustion warring inside him. He glanced at Emma, fragile as glass against the stone. He thought of his ranch reduced to ashes, of the men who laughed while they burned homes, of every step that had led him here. And then he looked at Tayanita, her face streaked with blood and smoke, her eyes blazing with defiance. No, he would not let Carver take another breath of triumph. Samuel raised his rifle, his voice raw. "Come and see how wrong you are." Carver's grin widened. "Gladly." He raised his revolver, the firelight glinting on the steel, and in that breathless instant, Samuel knew the next shot would decide more than a fight. It would decide whether his daughter lived to draw another breath. Carver stood in the glow of torches, revolver raised, his grin sharp as a blade. The men behind him circled like vultures, waiting for the kill. Samuel's rifle was steady, but his chest burned with the weight of every second. Emma's faint breaths, Tayanita's defiant stance, the ring of Carver's laughter, it all pressed down on him. The shot came first from Carver. The revolver boomed, the bullet sparking against stone inches from Samuel's head. Samuel dropped to one knee, sighting down his rifle, and fired back. His bullet tore through Carver's coat, grazing his side. Carver staggered but did not fall, his grin twisting into a snarl. "Not bad, Hart," he spat, blood seeping down his shirt. "But you'll need more than luck." He fired again, forcing Samuel to dive behind a boulder. The impact rang in his ears, shards of rock cutting his cheek. Samuel reloaded fast, sweat stinging his eyes. Meanwhile, Tayanita lunged into the fray, her knife flashing silver in the firelight. One rider swung his pistol at her, but she ducked low, slashing his leg. He collapsed with a scream, his gun tumbling into the sand. She snatched it up, firing point-blank at another man. Her movements were fierce, efficient, born not of rage but survival. Samuel rolled from cover, firing again. Another rider fell, but the circle tightened, torches closing in. The heat of fire licked at their skin, smoke curling thick. Carver advanced slowly, revolver steady, eyes locked on Samuel. "You've always been stubborn, Hart. Should have stayed on your burned-out ranch. Should have let the desert swallow you whole." Samuel gritted his teeth, rising from cover. "And leave her to you. Never." Their guns spoke again. 2 shots, echoing like thunder. Carver's bullet tore through Samuel's arm, spinning him sideways. His rifle clattered to the ground. Pain seared white-hot through his body. Carver laughed, stepping closer, revolver aimed at Samuel's chest. "There it is. The end you've been riding toward." Samuel pressed a bloody hand to his wound, forcing himself upright. His eyes burned with fury. "If I fall, I'll take you with me." But before Carver could fire, Tayanita struck. She lunged from the smoke, knife in hand, slashing across his arm. Carver roared, his revolver clattering into the dust. He spun, striking her hard across the face. She stumbled but did not fall, her eyes blazing with defiance. "You will not take her," she shouted. Carver seized her wrist, twisting it until the knife clattered free. He shoved her aside, turning back to Samuel. "You think this woman can save you? She's nothing but dirt under my boots." Samuel's vision blurred from blood loss, but his rage kept him steady. He staggered forward, fists clenched. "She saved my daughter. That makes her worth more than you'll ever be." Carver swung, his fist cracking against Samuel's jaw. Samuel reeled, spitting blood, but swung back, his punch slamming into Carver's ribs. The 2 men crashed together in the dust, fists and fury replacing bullets. They grappled, rolling through the firelight. Carver's strength was brutal, raw, but Samuel fought with the desperation of a father. He landed blow after blow, but Carver's hands closed around his throat, squeezing hard. Samuel gasped, vision dimming. Carver leaned close, his breath hot with venom. "I'll kill you slow, Hart. Then I'll take the girl." Samuel clawed at his grip, his strength fading. The world narrowed to firelight and Carver's grin. Then a sharp crack split the night. Carver's body jolted. His grip loosened. His eyes widened in shock. Behind him, Tyanita stood, a pistol in her hand, the one she had torn from a fallen rider. Smoke curled from the barrel. Carver staggered, blood spreading across his chest. He turned toward her, disbelief twisting his face. "You—" Samuel seized the moment. With a roar, he shoved Carver backward, slamming him into the dirt. Carver coughed, blood flecking his lips, but still he laughed, a low, broken sound. "You think this ends with me?" His men faltered at the edge of the circle, their torches wavering. Some cursed, others turned their horses, unwilling to fight without their leader's shadow. The flames flickered, and for the first time Samuel saw fear in their eyes. Carver gasped, clutching his chest, his grin fading. "Hart, the land don't care about you. It don't care about her. It takes, always takes." Samuel stood over him, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. "Then tonight it takes you." Carver's body went still, his last breath rattling out into the dust. Silence fell heavy. The remaining riders exchanged uneasy glances. Then, one by one, they turned their horses and fled, their torches shrinking into the night. Samuel dropped to his knees, his strength finally breaking. He pressed a trembling hand to his wound, eyes darting to Emma. She still breathed, fragile but alive. Relief crashed through him. Tyanita lowered the pistol, her face streaked with blood and smoke. She stepped closer, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It is done." Samuel met her gaze, nodding slowly. "For now." But inside, he knew Carver's death wasn't the end. The papers in Ahyoka's pouch, no, in this story it's Emma's survival itself, were still a spark. And sparks, once lit, spread farther than any man could control. The riverbed smelled of smoke and blood. Carver's body lay twisted in the sand, his dark coat soaked through, his grin finally gone. Around him, discarded torches smoldered, sending thin plumes of smoke into the night. The silence that followed the chaos felt heavier than the gunfire itself. Samuel knelt beside Emma, his bloody hands trembling as he touched her face. Her skin was clammy, her breath shallow but steady. Relief washed over him in a wave so sharp it nearly broke him. He whispered hoarsely, "You're still with me, Em." "You hold on, you hear?" Tyanita crouched beside them, her face streaked with dirt and ash, eyes steady despite the exhaustion in her body. She placed 2 fingers against Emma's throat, closing her eyes. After a long moment, she nodded. "She fights still, but she is weak. We must find water and shelter before dawn." Samuel looked up, his jaw tight. "Carver's men—" "They are gone," Tyanita interrupted, glancing at the dark horizon. "For now. Without him, they scatter like frightened dogs. But dogs without masters sometimes bite hardest. They may return, or others may come." Samuel's eyes hardened. "Then we move before they get the chance." He tried to rise, Emma in his arms, but his wounded arm buckled. Pain seared through him, hot and raw. He nearly dropped her before catching himself against the stone. "Let me," Tyanita said, her voice calm but firm. She reached for the girl. Samuel hesitated, his instinct flaring. Emma stirred faintly, her lips parting as if to call for him. His chest clenched. Handing her over felt like surrendering more than weight. It felt like surrendering his very reason for breathing. But Tyanita's gaze was steady, her hands sure. "If you carry her now, you will collapse before the sun rises, and then she will die with you." Samuel closed his eyes, torn apart by the truth in her words. At last, he nodded, placing Emma gently into her arms. Tyanita lifted the child with a strength that surprised him, settling her carefully against her shoulder. Emma's head rested in the crook of her neck, her breath feathering faint against her skin. Samuel rose slowly, leaning on his rifle. His vision swam for a moment, but he steadied himself. "Which way?" Tyanita tilted her head, listening. "East. There is a spring near the hills. If we reach it, she may live." They set off through the night, the desert vast and silent around them. The stars burned cold above, the moon their only guide. Samuel stumbled often, his wound bleeding through his sleeve, but he pushed on. Every time he faltered, he looked at Emma, at the fragile rise of her chest, and forced his body to keep moving. Hours passed. The land shifted, the sand giving way to rocky ground dotted with scrub. At last, the faint trickle of water reached their ears. Tianita quickened her pace, descending into a shallow hollow where a spring bubbled from between the rocks. She laid Emma gently beside the pool, cupping water in her hands and dripping it across the child's lips. Emma stirred faintly, swallowing, her breath easing. Samuel collapsed to his knees, cupping his own hands to drink. The water was cool, sharp, life itself flowing down his throat. He splashed it over his face, washing away the blood and grit. For the first time since the day began, he felt the faintest spark of hope. Tianita worked with quiet focus, soaking strips of cloth and pressing them to Emma's skin, cooling her fever. She hummed softly, low and rhythmic, the sound blending with the trickle of the spring. Samuel watched, torn between gratitude and unease. Finally, he broke the silence. "You knew him, Carver. The way you looked at him, it wasn't just hate." Tianita's hands stilled. For a moment she said nothing. Then her voice came low. "He killed my brother, burned our home while we slept, left my people scattered. I swore his breath would not outlast mine." Samuel's throat tightened. "And tonight you made sure of it." Her gaze flicked to him, sharp. "No. Tonight, I made sure your daughter breathes." That was more important than vengeance. Samuel swallowed hard, her words striking deeper than he expected. He looked at Emma, pale but alive, and felt the truth settle heavy in his chest. The night stretched on. Samuel and Tianita took turns keeping watch, though exhaustion pressed on both. Emma's breathing grew steadier, though her body remained fragile, her spirit balanced on a knife's edge. Just before dawn, Samuel heard it, the distant echo of hoofbeats. His body stiffened. He raised his rifle, scanning the horizon. Tianita rose silently beside him, knife in hand. But no torches glowed this time, no mocking laughter, only the faint silhouette of riders in the far distance, vanishing into the desert haze. Tianita exhaled slowly. Not Carver's men, strays perhaps, but the land is never empty. Samuel lowered the rifle, but unease gnawed at him. Carver was gone, yes, but the enemies named in Tianita's whispers, the men who profited from lies and fire, still breathed. They would not rest when word of his death spread. He glanced at Emma, then at Tianita. "This isn't over." Her eyes met his, calm and unyielding. "No, it has only begun." The first light of dawn broke across the desert, painting the sky in pale streaks of pink and grey. Samuel sat slumped against a rock, rifle across his lap, his bandaged arm throbbing with every heartbeat. Beside him, Emma stirred faintly, her chest rising a little stronger than the night before. It was enough to keep him alive inside. Tianita knelt at the spring, refilling the water skin. Her movements were steady, deliberate, as though the weight of exhaustion could never reach her. She looked over her shoulder at Samuel. "She breathes easier," he exhaled shakily, nodding. "I saw it, like the land itself gave her back." Tianita's gaze softened, though only slightly. "No land gives back what it takes. She fights still. That is her doing." Samuel's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to insist that his prayers had reached God, or that Tianita's herbs had saved her, but the truth was simpler. His little girl was fighting. That truth was enough. The horse shifted nervously nearby, ears flicking. Samuel's grip on his rifle tightened. He scanned the horizon, every shadow a threat. "We can't linger here. If Carver's men regroup, this spring's the first place they'll check." Tianita rose, slinging the water skin over her shoulder. "East, toward the mesas. There is shelter there, and from high ground you will see who follows." Samuel stood, groaning as pain lanced through his arm. He wrapped Emma tighter in the blanket and lifted her into his arms again. Her weight felt heavier than before, not because she had changed, but because his body was failing. Still, He clenched his jaw. He would carry her until his last breath. The desert stretched endless before them. Heat shimmered as the sun climbed, dust rising with every step. Hours passed, their silence broken only by the sound of Samuel's boots dragging and the steady rhythm of Tianita's strides. By midday, they reached a rise of red stone mesas jutting against the sky. Tianita guided them up a narrow path, carved by centuries of wind and water. The climb was brutal, each step threatening to buckle Samuel's knees. He stumbled once, nearly dropping Emma, but Tianita's hand shot out, steadying him. "Give her to me," she said firmly. Samuel shook his head, gasping. "She's my daughter, my burden." Her eyes flashed. "She is not a burden. She is life. And if you break before she recovers, you will both die." Her words cut deep. He hesitated, then with a shuddering breath, passed Emma into her arms. Tianita carried her easily, her balance sure on the steep path. Samuel followed, shame and gratitude twisting inside him. At the mesa's top, the view stretched endless, the desert sprawling like an ocean of sand and stone. Samuel scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing. In the far distance, dust plumes rose. Riders. Too far to count, but enough to stir dread in his gut. "They're still coming," he muttered. Tianita set Emma down gently in the shade of a rock ledge. "They will not stop, not while you carry her." Samuel turned sharply. "You mean not while we carry her? You're in this now as much as me." Tianita's face remained calm, but her eyes flickered. "I chose this path, but I will not lie. The men who come do not ride for you. They ride for her." The truth hung heavy. Samuel crouched beside Emma, brushing her hair from her face. He whispered, "You hear that, Em? They'll ride forever, but your old man ain't giving you up." As if in answer, Emma stirred, her lips parting. A faint sound escaped, a whisper of a word. Samuel leaned closer, heart leaping. "Papa!" His chest cracked wide open. He choked on a sob, pressing his forehead gently against hers. "I'm here, Em, I'm here." Tianita watched in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she turned sharply, her head tilted. "Riders are closer than I thought. We cannot stay." Samuel looked up, fury blazing through his exhaustion. "Then we make them bleed before they take another step." Tianita's voice was low, deliberate. "Not yet. If you fight now, you lose. Too many, too strong. We must draw them where the land fights with us." Samuel frowned. "And where's that?" She pointed east, toward jagged cliffs that cut across the desert like a wall. "There. The canyon swallows men whole. If we lead them in, the earth will decide who walks out." Samuel nodded slowly, though unease gnawed at him. The canyon meant risk. One wrong step, and Emma could be lost. But staying meant certain death. As they prepared to move, a gunshot cracked the air. Dust sprayed near Samuel's feet. He spun, rifle raised. On the far slope of the mesa, riders appeared. 3 at first, then 5, then more, their torches blazing even under the sun. Samuel's blood ran hot. "They found us." Tianita seized Emma, lifting her swiftly into her arms. Her voice rang sharp. "Run!" Samuel followed, his rifle barking as they fled across the mesa. Bullets hissed past, stone shattering under the impact. The horse reared, bolting ahead. Samuel cursed, sprinting after Tianita, his lungs burning. The riders surged closer, their shouts echoing. Samuel fired again, dropping one from the saddle, but more poured forward. Tianita glanced back, eyes fierce. "To the canyon!" The cliffs loomed ahead, jagged and merciless. Samuel's chest heaved, his legs threatening to give, but he forced himself onward. Emma's faint breaths and Tianita's unyielding pace pulled him forward, step by step. Behind them, the riders howled, closing fast. And Samuel knew whatever waited in that canyon would decide not just their fate, but Emma's very life. The canyon mouth yawned before them, a dark gash in the red cliffs. Samuel's chest burned, every breath tearing like fire through his lungs. Emma's faint stirring against his shoulder reminded him why he could not falter. Tianita was already ahead, carrying the girl now with surprising strength, her braid whipping behind her as she darted into the shadows of stone. Behind them, the thunder of hooves grew louder, closer. Carver's scattered men now regrouped under new orders, driven by greed and fear. Their shouts echoed across the mesa, cruel promises carried on the wind. Samuel stumbled into the canyon's entrance. The air cooler here, damp with the scent of stone and shadow. The walls rose high and narrow, blotting out the sun. Sound twisted, magnified, every hoofbeat and shout bouncing like a drum. Tianita pressed Emma against her chest and motioned sharply. This way. The canyon forks ahead. One path leads to cliffs too steep for horses. The other swallows riders whole. Samuel caught her arm, his voice raw. Swallows how? Her eyes flicked to the walls. The ground is not steady. Sand hides the cracks. One wrong step, and the earth falls away. Samuel's gut clenched. A trap of the land itself. Dangerous, but maybe the only chance. Then we use it. They pressed deeper, their footsteps muffled by sand. The horse followed reluctantly, nostrils flaring at the strange silence. Samuel glanced back. The riders were closer, torches flaring, their shouts echoing like war cries. At the fork, Tianita set Emma gently against the stone, then crouched low, brushing her fingers across the ground. She pointed to the left path. Safe enough if you tread light. She pointed to the right. Death waits there, but they will not see it until it opens beneath them. Samuel's eyes narrowed. So we lead them into it. She nodded once. But we must not falter. If you doubt your steps, you fall with them. Samuel clenched his jaw, hefting his rifle. Then we make sure they doubt first. The riders poured into the canyon, torches blazing, revolvers raised. Their leader, a scar-faced man with a cruel sneer, spurred ahead. Heart. No Carver this time to save your hide. Hand over the girl and maybe I let you keep breathing. Samuel stepped into the open, rifle leveled. His voice carried like stone, cracking. You'll have to kill me first. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining off the canyon walls. Samuel fired back, dropping one rider clean from the saddle. Tianita darted between shadows, pistol in one hand, knife in the other, her movements sharp and certain. She struck from angles unseen, forcing the riders back. The scar-faced man sneered, motioning his men forward. Drive 'em into the fork. Samuel's heart hammered. It was working. The riders pressed harder, unaware of the danger ahead. He fired again, the recoil jolting through his wounded arm, but he didn't falter. He shouted, "This way!" and darted left, his boots kicking up sand. Tianita followed, carrying Emma tight. The riders chased without question, their torches bobbing like fiery snakes in the dark. The ground trembled. A low groan rose beneath their feet. Samuel's blood chilled. He grabbed Tianita's arm, dragging her to the firmer path she had marked. Behind them, the riders thundered into the right fork, their shouts echoing triumphant. Then the earth split. With a deafening roar, the sand collapsed, the ground crumbling into a jagged pit. Horses screamed, men cursed, torches tumbled into darkness. The canyon swallowed them whole, their cries fading into the void. Dust billowed upward, choking the air. Samuel shielded Emma, his chest heaving. Tianita crouched low, eyes steady, even as the land itself roared. When the dust cleared, silence returned. Only a handful of riders had stopped in time, their faces pale in the torchlight. The scar-faced leader glared across the divide, fury twisting his face. "You think this ends it, Hart? There'll be others?" "Men with more gold, more guns. You can't outrun us all." Samuel raised his rifle, aiming across the gap. "Maybe not, but you won't be one of them." He fired. The man toppled backward, torch spilling into the sand. The few who remained turned their horses, fleeing into the night. Silence. True silence. Heavy and final. Samuel sank to his knees, cradling Emma. She stirred faintly, her lips parting as she whispered something he barely heard. "Papa." His throat closed. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. "I've got you, Em. I'll never let go." Tianita stood beside them, her shadow long against the canyon wall. She wiped her blade clean, her voice quiet but firm. "Tonight, the earth chose us, Tomorrow, men will still hunt, but for now, she breathes. Samuel nodded, clutching his daughter tight. Relief surged through him, fierce and fragile. But deep inside it, he knew the fight wasn't finished. Carver was dead, but the men behind him, the ones whose names had poisoned these lands, still lived. And sooner or later, the desert would demand another reckoning. The canyon lay silent after the collapse, the air thick with dust. Samuel's lungs burned as he drew in ragged breaths, his arms slick with blood, but all that mattered was the faint rise and fall of Emma's chest against him. She was alive. For now, that was enough. Tianita crouched nearby, scanning the shadows where the last riders had fled. Her knife was still in her hand, her shoulders rigid. Only when the echoes of hooves faded into the distance did she finally lower her weapon. "It is done," she said quietly. Samuel shook his head, his jaw tight. No, this was just their claws. The men who sent them still breathe. And they won't stop until they have what they want. Tianita's gaze lingered on Emma, wrapped tight in the blanket. "Then we do not stop either." Samuel's throat tightened. He looked down at his daughter, her lips dry, her skin pale but warmer than before. She whispered something faint, her voice like the brush of wind. He leaned close, straining to hear. "Papa." Water. Relief tore through him, jagged and overwhelming. He almost laughed, but the sound broke into a sob. "I'll get you all the water you want, Em. Just stay with me." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then looked at Tianita. "We can't keep running blind. We need shelter. Food. A place they can't reach." Her eyes narrowed, scanning the jagged canyon walls. "There is a place, an old outpost, long abandoned by soldiers. Few remember it. Fewer still dare approach. The spirits of the land keep most away." Samuel frowned. "Spirits or not, if it keeps her breathing, I'll take it." They set off again, following a narrow path out of the canyon. Samuel stumbled often, his wounded arm throbbing, but Tianita carried Emma with practiced care, her steps light and sure. The night stretched long, the desert vast and merciless. By dawn, the cliffs gave way to rolling scrub. The outpost appeared suddenly, a silhouette against the rising sun, a cluster of crumbling stone walls, half swallowed by sand. Its gates hung crooked, its watchtower broken, but to Samuel it looked like salvation. Inside, the air was cooler, the stone holding back the desert's heat. Samuel laid Emma on a tattered cot left behind by soldiers long gone. She stirred weakly, her lips parting as if to call for him. "I'm here," he whispered, brushing her hair from her face. "I'm not going anywhere." Tianita crouched beside him, unwrapping her pouch of herbs. She worked silently, mixing powders with water, pressing the mixture to Emma's lips. Samuel watched, torn between doubt and desperate hope. Minutes passed. Then Emma coughed faintly, swallowing the bitter liquid. Her breath came a little stronger, her color less ashen. Samuel's chest cracked with relief. He pressed his hands to his face and whispering, "Thank God, thank God." Tianita's gaze flicked to him. Thank her spirit, she chose to stay. Samuel looked at her, his voice low but rough. "You talk like you've seen too many who didn't." Her eyes darkened, and for a moment he saw the weight she carried. "I have. My brother, my mother, my people. The land takes what it wishes. Tonight, it spared her." Silence hung heavy. Samuel swallowed hard, his gratitude tangled with guilt. "If not for you, she'd be buried in the sand right now. I don't know how to thank you." Tianita shook her head. "You owe me nothing. Your daughter's breath is payment enough." Samuel rose slowly, pacing the broken walls. His voice grew harsh. "That's not true. Men like Carver don't ride for scraps. They rode for her, for what she means. And that means they'll come again." Tianita's gaze sharpened. "Yes. And when they do, you must decide. Do you keep running, hiding her breath from the world, or do you stand and let her survival light the fire others fear?" The words struck like a hammer. Samuel turned away, staring at the horizon where dust still lingered faint. He thought of his burned ranch, of Carver's laugh, of Emma's small voice calling him back from despair. I'm tired of running, he admitted, his voice raw. But I won't drag her into another war. She's just a child. Tyanita's voice softened. Children carry the future whether they choose it or not. What you do now decides if hers is stolen or lived. Samuel turned back, his eyes burning. And what about you? Why risk your life for us? Why keep fighting when you've lost so much already? For the first time, her calm cracked. Her voice trembled, just slightly. Because I could not save my brother. Because when Carver burned our home, I watched the smoke and did nothing. I swore I would not fail again. Samuel's chest tightened. He saw her not just as a healer or a fighter, but as someone bound by the same weight he carried. Loss, regret, a need for redemption. Before he could speak, a sound shattered the silence, the distant echo of hoofbeats. Samuel stiffened, grabbing his rifle. They're not done. Tyanita rose, knife in hand, her eyes fierce. No, they will never be done. But neither are we. Emma stirred, whispering faintly, Papa. Samuel bent quickly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'm here, Em. Always. Then he straightened, rifle ready, his jaw set. The hoofbeats grew louder, dust rising on the horizon. The outpost walls shuddered with the promise of another storm, and Samuel knew the reckoning had only just begun. The outpost walls trembled with the rhythm of approaching hooves. Dust rose on the horizon, curling upward like smoke from a fire that never died. Samuel stood at the broken gate, rifle steady despite the blood seeping through his bandages. Behind him, Tyanita crouched beside Emma, her hands working swiftly with herbs and cloth, her voice a low hum that wrapped the child in fragile strength. The riders came fast, 7, maybe 8, faces hard, guns gleaming in the pale morning sun. Not Carver's loyalists this time, but men who rode for gold alone. Samuel recognized 1 or 2 drifters he'd seen in Silver Rock, men who had laughed when his ranch burned. They had no loyalty, no cause, just hunger. Their leader reined in at the edge of the outpost, a tall man with a scar running across his chin. He smiled like a wolf scenting blood. Heart, he called, his voice booming. Word is, you're still breathing when you should be dust. And that the girl you carry is worth more than coin. Samuel's jaw clenched. She's worth more than all of you put together. The man laughed, shaking his head. I don't care about worth. I care about what men will pay. Hand her over, and maybe I don't spill your guts across this stone. Tyanita rose slowly, knife glinting in her hand. Step closer, and the land will take you like it took Carver. The men shifted uneasily, muttering. Carver's name still carried weight, even in death. But the leader sneered, lifting his revolver. Carver was a fool. I ain't. He spurred forward, and the others followed. Gunfire erupted, bullets sparking against stone. Samuel fired back, dropping one rider clean from the saddle. Tyanita darted along the wall, her blade flashing as she struck at another who dared too close. The fight was brutal, close. Samuel's rifle roared until it clicked empty. He swung it like a club, cracking one man across the skull. Blood spattered the dust. His vision swam, but rage kept him steady. 2 riders broke through, charging straight for the cot where Emma lay. Samuel's heart froze. He lunged, but his legs faltered. No! Tyanita moved first. With a cry that tore from her chest, she leapt at the men, slashing one across the throat, spinning to plunge her knife into the other's side. Both fell, their guns clattering useless into the dirt. She stood over Emma, chest heaving, eyes blazing. Samuel's knees nearly gave out in relief, but the leader was still standing, revolver aimed steady at his chest. "You're finished, Hart," he growled. "1 bullet, and the girl's mine." Samuel met his eyes, breathing hard. "You don't get her, not while I draw breath." The man smirked. "Then you won't draw it long." He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, but Samuel didn't fall. Instead, the man staggered, shock flashing across his face. Blood blossomed at his side. He turned, eyes wide, to see Emma, barely awake, gripping the fallen rider's pistol with trembling hands. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her voice was weak, but it carried, "Leave, my papa." The leader gaped, rage twisting into fear. He raised his revolver again. but Samuel was faster. With a roar, he lunged forward, driving the butt of his empty rifle into the man's skull. The crack echoed like thunder. The leader crumpled into the dust, lifeless. Silence fell. The few remaining riders cursed, spurred their horses, and fled into the horizon. The outpost was still. Samuel dropped to his knees beside Emma, tears burning his eyes. He pulled the pistol gently from her small hands, kissing her forehead. "You're here. You're alive. You saved me, Em." Emma's eyes fluttered, a faint smile on her lips. Stayed. His chest broke open. He cradled her close, sobbing into her hair. "Always. I'll always stay." Tayanita stood over them, her knife dripping red, her face streaked with dirt and blood. For once, her calm cracked, and Samuel saw the weight of all she carried, the brother she lost, the home she couldn't save, the vow she had kept tonight. She whispered, almost to herself, "The spirits chose her path. She will live." Samuel looked up at her, gratitude blazing in his eyes. "We owe you everything." Her gaze softened. "You owe me nothing, but you owe her the truth. Do not hide her life in shadows. Let the world see she breathes." Samuel nodded slowly, clutching his daughter close. He knew she was right. Running had carried them this far, but Emma's breath, fragile yet unbroken, was more than survival. It was defiance. The sun broke fully over the horizon, flooding the outpost with light. The dust began to settle. Samuel rose unsteadily, Emma in his arms, Tayanita at his side. The fight was over, but the war for her life and for the truth was only beginning. The sun climbed higher, washing the outpost ruins in harsh light. The smell of blood and smoke clung to the stones, but the silence that followed was different from the one that had haunted the night. It was calmer, almost sacred. Samuel sat with Emma in his lap, brushing the hair gently from her forehead. Her breathing had steadied, each rise of her chest stronger than the last. He pressed his lips to her temple, whispering words he hadn't dared to believe he'd ever speak again. "You're safe now, Em. You're safe." Tayanita stood at the gate, watching the desert horizon. Her knife was sheathed, her shoulders straight, but her eyes scanned every flicker of dust with the vigilance of someone who knew peace was always temporary. She finally turned, her gaze resting on Samuel and the girl. "She will live, but you must move soon. Others will hear of this. The land carries whispers faster than riders." Samuel nodded slowly. He had no strength left to argue, but his heart swelled with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. He kissed Emma's hand, then looked up at Tayanita. "Why stay with us? You could have walked away a dozen times." Her eyes softened, though her voice stayed steady. "Because I lost too much when I walked away once before. This time I stayed." Samuel swallowed, his throat tight. He thought of his burned ranch, of Carver's laugh, of the ash and silence that had nearly broken him, and then he thought of this woman, fierce and unyielding, who had refused to let his daughter slip into the grave. "You gave me back my little girl," he said quietly. "That's more than I can ever repay." Tayanita crouched beside him, her hand resting briefly on Emma's blanket. "Then repay me by keeping her safe, by letting her grow not in fear but in truth." Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Her lips formed a weak smile as she whispered, "Papa, I dreamed. You were gone." Samuel's chest cracked wide open. He hugged her gently, his voice shaking. "I'll never leave you, not in this life, not in the next." Tayanita's gaze lingered on them, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, looking once more toward the horizon. "The world will not stop hunting. Men fear what they cannot own. But she carries more than breath. She carries your fight and mine." Samuel rose carefully, Emma still in his arms. His wounded arm throbbed, but he stood tall. He looked out at the endless desert, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a grave. It felt like a path. "Then we keep moving," he said firmly. "Not running, not hiding, moving forward." Tayanita gave a single nod, approval flickering in her eyes. Forward, then, until the land itself cannot deny her place. Together, they stepped from the ruined outpost, the horse trailing behind. The desert stretched wide, unforgiving yet filled with promise. Samuel tightened his hold on Emma, her faint smile pressed against his chest. He glanced at Tayanita, walking steady at his side, and felt something shift deep inside. They were no longer strangers bound by chance. They were survivors bound by choice. The land had taken much, but today it had given back something Samuel thought he'd lost forever. If this story touched you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of resilience, sacrifice, and unexpected bonds in the harshest times. And if you want to keep walking with us, watch the next story waiting for you. It's one you won't forget.